Hi there, it's Atul here, and we are on another live stream here today. And just before we get started, we'll do a quick round of introduction as to who we are. Today, of course, we'll be having Dan with us as our guest. I'll be presenting us, but I'll do a very quick introduction of who I am. I'm Atul. I'm an online maths tutor. I teach pretty much K-Stage 1 to A-level maths, and I'm based in London. So yeah, over to you, Charlotte.
I'm Charlotte. I teach secondary maths, 11 to 16 mainly. And we do have a sixth form. I've been teaching about 8 years, and I'll be second in department in September.
Great. And you're based in?
It's Staffordshire.
Staffordshire. All right. Over to you, Adam.
I'm Adam Mercer. I'm a maths teacher and I teach in the East Midlands.
Marcia.
Hi, I'm Marcia Gunson. I teach in a secondary school. We're just in 11 to 16. So I've been teaching maths for just over 8 years, and also do some intertrust work as well with maths. And yeah, based in a city lead school.
Over to you finally, Dan.
Yeah, Dan Pearcy. I've been teaching for, I think, 14 years now. I'm never quite sure exactly how long, but I am based in Lausanne in Switzerland, and yeah, very much just enjoying teaching maths from 11 to 18 right now.
Brilliant. Well, so you've got something very special planned for us. We've got this hashtag Pedagogy Prompts. So if you're on Twitter right now, if you've got any question, Dan will introduce us to what that is, but just retweet this tweet that's gone live. Just use a hashtag, ask any question. This is really, it's about you. We really like this kind of lively feel where you ask us questions on Twitter, and then we are having a chat and a presentation as well. We're trying to come up with this new way of interacting on Twitter and in live like this. So yeah, take it away, Dan, here.
Yeah, so pedagogy prompts, what are they and why might they be useful? So I guess I just wanted to give a little bit of rationale for them first, just really quickly. So I mean, I've been in SLT for the last 6 years, and that means that I've sat in a ridiculous number of incredibly boring meetings, and so you know, you start thinking a lot about how you can make meetings more effective, for one thing. So one reason for a pedagogy prompt is to kind of almost like provide a little bit of differentiation for teachers, in a sense, given that there are usually 4 to 6 ideas on a prompt, or one idea that's so wide-ranging that, you know, a lot of people could have different thoughts about it. But sitting in meetings, maths meetings, SLT meetings, where you already know a lot of the stuff, you know, fortunately or unfortunately, and you'd prefer to maybe to be thinking about something that, you know, might prompt your thinking in a different way, and has lots of different variety, lots of different avenues. I thought would be really helpful. Also, you know, like, it took me blooming ages to increase my pedagogical content knowledge. I'd say I've been teaching 14 years now, and I feel like, you know, I'm not so bad now, but it would have been nice to have kind of fast-tracked that in some way. And I feel like a pedagogy prompt maybe could do that. And that's partly because, you know, a lot of the way that I increased my PCK was just through reading article after article, so many articles, ATM, MA, you know, all these different awesome media, don't get me wrong, but so much of it was in isolation. And I feel like with a pedagogy prompt, I feel like the whole point is to collaborate on pedagogy and to learn from both experienced colleagues, but also, you know, someone that's just done a PGCE as well. So I think that collaborative pedagogical content knowledge is going to kind of fast track things a little bit, and also be more fun as well. Not all of us have time to kind of just wade through article after article. You know, I did when I was kind of single and young without kids and things. But nowadays, like, God, it's hard to get like 1 minute. You know, just making a cup of tea is hard enough. So you know, it's just not that much time to read articles anymore. But if there's a meeting where I don't have to read an article in advance, I don't have to do any work outside the meeting, I can just come in and I can see a prompt in front of me, and it might spark some thinking. One of the cells might spark thinking out of the 4 or 3, how many there are, whichever one I want to engage with. then I don't have to spend 10, 15 minutes reading outside the meeting. Or worse still, which I have done as a head of department, I've asked people in my department to read an article right there and then at the start of a meeting. So we spent like 15 minutes in silence. And it's just a bit of a terrible way to use meeting time, you know? So I feel like there's lots of different rationales for them. And yeah, so I'm quite excited about their use in a sense. I'm excited about discussing them today because it's the first time that I've actually discussed them collaboratively. Just kind of made them, and see, maybe it's just a terrible idea and it just go horrifically, but hopefully not. So that's kind of the rationale, and so I hoped that we could essentially just go straight into discussing a few prompts. And normally in a meeting, I think that obviously having some almost like some think, pair, share time would be normal. I think having time to think about these things and so that everyone has a chance to contribute afterwards as well is really important. But in this particular case, we've all seen the prompts in advance so that we don't have to kind of waste your time just sitting here thinking for a minute. So we can all kind of dive in maybe after kind of 15 or 20 seconds just taking a look at it. So can I share my screen, Atul?
Absolutely. We've already had a request saying, have you got an example? Can you share with us maybe by a screen share? So there we go. There's a prompt for the pedagogy prompt.
Yes, exactly. So I'm just going to share my screen now,
yeah.
and we're going to dive into looking at some. So I'm just going to go back onto the homepage just very quickly. So the pedagogy prompts kind of section is here. So you can click on that section, or of course up here as well. But there is also kind of more rationale for pedagogy prompts. A mini video that was the Seneca conference a few weeks ago. And if you're a HOD or if you're someone running a meeting, there's kind of like 2 prompts that kind of explain the rationale and kind of provide maybe some principles for a pedagogy prompt. Just remembering some just basic things about collaboration, that maybe we could have some collective choice and some autonomy in the types of pedagogy prompts that we discuss before they're discussed so that one person isn't choosing them. And then some individual thinking time, like I said, sharing time. And then I think a really crucial part, number 4 there, the kind of 4th step in actually doing something practical with the discussion. So often I think in meetings you can have these theoretical discussions that are awesome and really fun to do. But will something happen afterwards? Will a resource be created that the whole department can use? Will it be logged on a scheme of work? So I think that's a really important step, which obviously we won't be doing today. We'll just be kind of essentially doing mainly free and a tiny bit of 2. So just to go into the pedagogy prompts, and the first one we're going to discuss, which is prime factor methods. So I'm just going to go into this post. So with a prompt, just to be really clear, this one particular one has 4 cells, and so my hope was that like I say, in a department meeting, then you would look at the prompt and you would kind of focus maybe you'd skim them all first, and then you'd kind of maybe focus in on one of them. It might be a little bit too much to try and think about all of them in one go, whichever one kind of tickles your fancy really. And then you might have the Hinge questions in front of you. So here are 6 Hinge questions here, so quite a few Hinge questions, or avenues, or maybe even resources as well. And so you might have those in front of you, or you might decide just to look at the prompt to begin with, and then take a gander at the Hinge questions after that. But in this case, we've all seen the prompt, and the Hinge questions were already there as well, which we can look at later. But I thought I'd kind of turn it over to someone else now to basically kind of focus in on any cell they want, and any kind of, even if it's not necessarily a cell, it might be kind of how you the technique for creating prime factor product to prime factors, for example. So really, just any avenue that you want to kind of take this down, you can do. So I thought we'd dive into a discussion, and I don't know, Charlotte, do you want to start off with any kind of thinking that you had when you saw any one of those cells?
I think I was surprised a bit by 3. I don't think I'd ever seen that before, I'll be honest.
Yes. Yeah. So I don't want to kind of lead the discussion too much, but so surprised by 3. Is it something that you would use, do you think? is it something that you could utilize in lessons, or would you want to do like an investigation to kind of try to help students discover it? How do you think you'd kind of run with it, or would you run with it? Would you just nice to know?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'd want to know more about it, to be honest, before I did anything like that in a lesson. But yeah, quite like it was something to make me think about, because you always think you know quite a lot about prime factor methods, especially after 8 years, but it's surprising when you learn something new.
Yeah, I agree with Charlotte as well. I think this whole process, I think no matter what kind of levels teachers are at, actually looking at this as probably always something where somebody's not as confident, or it's not something they may always go to. So actually it's about engaging teachers at all levels on their pedagogy. And actually then I think what I would do with number 3, because like Charlotte, I probably wouldn't use this, but then we would probably as a team think about, well, how can we use this to stretch some of our students, or have those open-ended challenges and things. So for me, I think it'd be quite a good way to kind of engage teachers, especially those teachers that have been teaching a long time, and maybe sometimes stuck in a particular method that they always go to. So it's kind of revisiting things that they might not always do.
Can I be honest and say, I must admit, I don't think I've never, it's probably out of ignorance more than anything else, I've never thought about using prime factor methods with any of these 4 things. And I probably should have done, really, because I think when it comes to simplifying fractions as well, especially when you've got sort of bigger numbers that aren't as easy to compute in your head, like 24 over 126, getting kids, I can just see what my kids would do in my head now. The first thing they try and do is they try and divide it by 2, then they try and divide it by 2 again and struggle this, that way and t'other, before, if I get them to sort of do the prime factorization, I can teach them how to cancel fractions appropriately. It seems a lot more simple and a lot more straightforward. I must admit, and I'll be completely honest, I didn't know about number 3 at all, having done GCSE maths, A-level maths, further maths, 3 years at university. I didn't realise that was a thing until a few weeks back. If one of my previous teachers has told me beforehand, I do apologise. I must have forgotten. But I'd love the conversations that promotes. To be fair, as well, like, why are we adding 1 to the powers? Well, you can consider 0 as a power and how 1 is a factor of every number. I like how it links to product rule for counting. My only question will be is, when would I necessarily introduce that? Because I think to myself, prime factors I've probably introduced quite early on year 7. I'm debating whether I probably wouldn't have introduced it before like index powers, so they probably understand what to the power of 0 means and what to the power of 1 means before we do prime factors. But I don't know if they'd sort of know things like product rule for counting and sort of choosing options. I don't know if I would have taught that by that point. So would I introduce that when I teach prime factors, or would I sort of, when I revisit prime factors at a later date, would I then sort of include it then? Possibly. Again, same for simplifying surds. I think it's brilliant in that respect, because again, it allows you to break down bigger numbers. And I like how in this particular one here, how it mentions 2 squared. I'd possibly be tempted to include a line that says equals the root of 4 times 2 times 3 to allow them to jump to 4 coming out of the bracket. But I suppose it's 2 squared. I would have shown them that a square and a square root, what effect that sort of has. So I don't know, but looking at that, would I consider teaching prime factorization earlier? Well, yeah, looking at it now, yeah, I certainly would. And I'd probably also look at dedicating more time to it. I think to myself, again, not saying I teach exactly to the test, but I know sort of Edexcel, I've always had that feeling they ask their questions pretty straightforward when it comes to prime factors. They'll always express so-and-so as a product of prime factors. It wasn't until sort of a few years back, I think it might have been an OCR question, where they had them expressing they gave the students the product of prime factors for 90, I think it was. And then the next question was, what's the product of prime factors for 180? And the kids I had in front of me at the time, again, they did that thing that we'd expect. They started working out the prime factors of 180. They didn't immediately use the previous question and add an extra power of 2 onto it. So yeah, it made me really revisit sort of what purpose am I teaching prime factors for? Is it a result of my sequencing of topics? Could I shift things around and sort of show how these applications for prime factors sort of work a bit easier? Sorry, I feel like I'm rambling on for a second there.
No, that's all really practical stuff. I mean, we all have to do that, right? We have to get our pupils from A to B. And if, I mean, just to give my insight as a tutor, I might see a difference. I might be dealing with edXL one moment with one tutor, AQA with another one, IGCSE edXL, and then maybe a US syllabus. And often what it comes down to is they're heading towards edXL, GCSE, non-calc paper, and what type of questions you have to kind of work backwards. What is the hardest type of question or the easiest foundation type of question? And if this type of stuff is in no paper at all whatsoever, it almost glosses us all by. Like number 3 is completely alien to me. Number 1, honestly, again, I wouldn't have thought of that. It makes perfect sense looking at it. Number 2, yes, you can spot a square number straight away. I might use that. And again, 4, I don't use it that much, but perhaps it's because of, if we work backwards, the kind of questions we're seeing in AQA or Excel don't prompt that kind of straight away cause and effect type answer. So Marcia, I think you've got a hand up as well.
Yeah, and one of the things me and Charlotte were kind of discussing before this was one of the methods that we felt we would probably use now, and it's based on the research paper by George Garcia, is looking at the prime factor tiles. And I know I've observed this quite a lot in lessons, and I know Charlotte's used this method. And I think for me, what I really liked about that was when I've observed it, it's allowed students at all levels to really engage, but also those students to really understand those concepts as well. So that was something that we kind of spoke about, and actually we would probably add that on as a tool to go with this.
Yeah, I feel like certainly for the questions I was talking about, with like, if you got the prime factors of 90, how do you get the prime factors for 180? With prime factor tiles, when they've got it right there in front of them, it's just, it seems easier to put those blocks together to sort of see the connections, and then I can stretch it out to prime factors of 45 going the other way. Then sort of how it removes a factor, it removes a power of 2. I haven't used prime factor tiles yet. I know Johnny Hall's a big fan of them, and he's got fantastic resources for them on his website. But I think next year that's something I want to build into my lessons. Sort of get the printing budget out, get the laminator out, get them prepared, get them individually packed, and start sort of allowing students to make those connections a bit easier. I think one of the most, I'm looking at your question too on your website here, Dan, about are there any other applications for prime factorization? And yeah, these 4 sort of seem sort of like a bit very eye-opening now. But I still love the HCF LCM connection sort of with a Venn diagram now, because again, probably something, say, not that long ago, 2 or 3 years ago, I sort of used to I teach it but sort of gloss over it, not go into that much detail, not sort of go into the finer details why. And since we sort of researched it a bit, it's fascinating in that respect, sort of like, why does it, when you put them into a Venn diagram, why does the overlap in the middle produce the highest common factor? Well, and it seems relatively obvious when you start to sort of think about it, how, well, it's the fact, you're looking here, you've picked out the factors they've got in common, you've picked out all the common factors, which as a result produces the highest common factor. And I love how that sort of, and that's what I now start telling my students, and they start to pick up on it a lot better. And I love how, again, with sort of how multiplying all the numbers together, because these numbers were all sort of multiplied together to make, I'm trying to think of what numbers they tend to use for this, something like 48 and 72. These numbers all multiplied together to make 48. These numbers all multiplied together to make 72. If you multiply them all together, you're going to get a common multiple, but eliminating those repeats like it does in the middle, where you've where you've eliminated those repeats, you're then instantly going to get the lowest common multiple of them both. And I think it's, I thought to myself, it's something I probably used to cover in 1, maybe 2 lessons. And maybe now it's something I probably should dedicate maybe 2 or 3 lessons to, and sort of, again, maybe teach it sort of with fractions where I dedicate time to fractions where my immediate one to go to, and I know it's not always the best one to go to, is when you've got to simplify fractions with large numbers, or simplify fractions where it's not immediately sort of, actually probably simplifying large numbers that are odd numbers. So my pupils can't immediately look to try and divide it by 2 and try and have to find better strategies to simplify it, to check that it can be simplified.
Yeah, it reminds me somewhat, it reminds me somewhat of what Chris Bolton often says, which is kind of starting off with an example that isn't an example that students will draw almost a wrong generality from, so like you think you can always divide by 2, and as you said before, like with simplifying fractions, I know clearly when they're both even you can, but when they're not even, like often it's the kind of the go-to thing. So if you have your first 3 examples where none of them are divisible by 2, it might actually be a nice way into just not even talking about product of prime factors right now. Talking about simplifying fractions, it's probably a good idea to start with some examples that aren't divisible by 2. Sorry.
No, I agree with that as well. And I think it's quite easy sometimes for us to fall into that trap as well.
Yeah.
So, can I just ask, based on your question 3 then, how do you initially teach factorization? Because I'm going to hold my hand up and say that I use factor trees. And I know a lot of people said recently that's not necessarily the most appropriate one. And I can understand why. I teach finding factors in a very similar method. I've seen kids get confused between when they're asked to find the prime factor, express this as a product of prime factors, or find the factors of this regular number. So how would you initially teach prime factorization?
Do you think, Adam, as well, because of when we're doing the factor trees, we're not kind of teaching for that depth, we're just teaching that kind of quick process? And I'm another one, I used to always teach that method.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah, because our understanding and teaching this lies on a continuum, right? You first introduce the idea of a prime number, factors, and then it's not a topic that ever ends, really. I mean, you could continue with prime factorization well beyond that. So, and your knowledge of it and your pupils' knowledge of it builds very gradually on this kind of web. So it just depends on where they are on that journey. If they haven't done certs, then you can't use that. Yeah.
Proof of infinite many primes has a product of prime factors in, doesn't it? Yeah. Keep going. Sorry, Atul.
Yeah. So
what you said just
depends on where they are in that particular journey, and that's a judgment call for you to make depending on who you have in front of you and where they are in that journey. So I'm guessing what you're kind of just stimulating us to give these things that we can then use as appropriate with whoever is in front of us.
I also think that, especially with 1 and 2, it's the simplifying fractions and the third. It's a really nice way to bring back prime factorization back into other things, because surely revisiting those things more often is better. So it gives you a few more options to bring it in where you wouldn't normally.
Yes, it's funny with I definitely agree with that. With 1 and 2, often I set extension questions at the end of tasks and things where the numbers are horrible. And so often with simplifying surds, I don't teach it with product of prime factors. I just say, I don't know if this is good pedagogy or not, but I often say you need to find a square. We talk about it, of course, and things, and we build it up from there, and we talk about kind of non-examples, so many examples that you can't simplify, can you? And so often say you need to break it up into a square number and another number. Or just if it was root 100, then it would just be a square number. So for root 24 would be root 4 times root 6. And that's a really easy one to do that for I'm very much talking for, not necessarily for kind of your really low attaining classes, but that's how I would normally teach it. And then when they get one like root 1068 or something, it's really nice then to then give them a worked example of this method. So just taking a screenshot of this particular cell, saying, oh, here's an interesting method. Can you understand that? And apply it to this new context where it might make things a little bit easier. I really like to get them kind of studying worked examples as extension things. And the same thing with simplifying fractions as well.
Can I just jump on as well? You know, the non-example stuff you said, I think that's another, it's kind of separate from what we're talking about, but so powerful. And actually, by introducing that into your lesson and kind of with these examples, just really embeds kind of making sure the understanding's there with students as well. I don't know if everybody else would agree with that, with the non-examples.
Yeah.
Very much.
Could we look at mathsbot.com and see factor tile? I don't know if you use that. And I think Charlotte mentioned prime factor tiles. You've got some physical ones, right?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I've completely stolen. Sorry, Johnny. I have permission. Did ask. But yeah, they're colourful primes, and they're lovely. They're one of the things you definitely have to play around with them to really see the benefit, I think. So, I mean, luckily for everyone, that session's still available, I think, online on the site. So that's good, because this is kind of teaching it from scratch when you first sort of introduce prime factors, to do prime factorization using these tiles and having them around in front of you. It's just, yeah, there's no substitute to playing around with the things yourselves, I think.
Yeah, because you can manipulate them with your hands and kind of give yourself permission to get them wrong, and until they literally click into place and give. So this is very neat. So something like we're live streaming right now, so people can have they may not have discovered this, but yeah, it's a very, very neat way of doing it.
Yeah, because I've not seen it used on the actual MathsBot site, so it's quite excited as well, Charlotte. I've seen students using it physically, but I need to have a play around, I think, with this bit and kind of learn how to move it all around.
Yeah.
So can I kind of I don't know if we can kind of reflect a little bit on that process, because I think that I always kind of consider the fact that there's a danger that you can just go in so many different tangents and everyone's got different thoughts, which is incredible. Yeah, I do think it's worked a little bit different with the meetings. I do imagine more of a think, pair, share type scenario where you pair it first, and then maybe the pair decides on one thing they want to kind of present to the group over a shortened period of time, say a minute or something. So in terms of structures and things, what we could do maybe is we could go for the next prompt now, and we could kind of maybe try out kind of 1 minute each. Obviously, it's hard to pair things in this scenario, but we could maybe try 1 minute each and see how that goes for the next prompt. People are happy to move on to the next one. And I know that we haven't kind of summarized all of our discussions on this, but hopefully in a department meeting scenario, you would be kind of in some way summarizing some discussions there, drawing out maybe 1 to 3 major points of the discussion that you want to log in some way.
Dan, can I just ask, how long would you recommend in terms of time-wise to use this activity or tool within a meeting and discussion?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, obviously, the standard, how long's a piece of string? Yeah, I mean, for me, when I was head of department again for 6 years, and I would all our meetings were pedagogical focused. All admin was done via kind of other media and other methods. So for me, I'd probably be looking to the way that I like to set up meetings of people actually doing things for themselves, so that we're not having to spend time outside, like planning lessons and things. Maybe we can plan lessons in meetings together collaboratively and stuff. So you plan a lesson for next week. So maybe what I'd do is I'd give a choice of 3 or 4 prompts, obviously knowing the curriculum quite well myself, knowing that things were coming up in the curriculum. And then, so we'd probably have a kind of 20-minute discussion on a prompt, log some things and stuff, and then actually create some resources for lessons next week within the meeting. So have kind of half an hour where you're starting to create a resource, maybe a task sheet or a PowerPoint, whatever you want to do. I always think it's important to use meeting time where people are actually, they feel like they're creating something, for something quite near in the future, So for next week's lessons, I planned a lesson after that meeting. That's awesome.
Yeah, the leave feeling it's got purpose to it.
Exactly. Yeah. So so obviously it could be 10 minutes, it could be a whole meeting. Who knows?
Nice. Yeah, we've got some comments going on in social media. Got Jenna Sanderson. Love the variety of discussions these could create between colleagues. Even just 10-15 minutes could result in everyone taking something useful away. Caroline Makisa says, I love the use of prime factors for simplifying surds. I'd not thought of using that before. Definitely use it next time I teach this topic. Great way to spot the square numbers. Yeah, Michaela, I love those prime factorization examples. Understanding prime factors really helps with the non-calc paper. So yeah, so if you're on Twitter, keep it going. Yeah, we want to. It is all about not just us, but about you as well. See what prompts you. Yeah.
Great, nice, it's awesome stuff. So here's another prompt. Let's move into this one, and like I said, maybe with this one, maybe we could each kind of have 1 minute, and it might be just to draw on one of the cells or on none of the cells whatsoever, but maybe we could try it a bit differently. Instead of kind of varying between lots of cells, maybe kind of sticking to one thought process in a sense, and seeing how that goes as well. And then after we've done that, we could maybe kind of draw upon each other's thought processes. Would anyone like to start? Adam, would you like to make a start, maybe, on any, or would you think? Do we need 30 seconds or a minute to have a think?
Yeah, I think we absorb.
Yeah, we have 30 seconds.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
We're absorbing cognitive load and all that stuff. I can dive in.
Go on, Atul.
I typically tend to go with this. So this is really great, actually. One I haven't. It would look really good on some kind of dynamic geometry software, which I'm sure you've done somewhere.
I've actually got that. I can do that. I can do that in a moment if you want, or right now if you want.
Get you coding in the background. Yeah, I mean 2 and 4 are the sort of classic ones, aren't they? And splitting the triangles. But with 2, I tend to start with, like, if you take any polygon and reduce all the things down to a single point, then you get that 360 as a sum of the exterior angles. I've got a dynamic geometry example where my tutees will actually just move it around, and it can make any type of polygon, but it all kind of reduces down to a point, and then they're really convinced, even though it's not a proof, but at that point they know that everything reduces to a point, so it must be 360, all the exterior angles. And then if you know the exterior angle, you need the line angles in a line, and work from there. That's usually the way I do it, or splitting triangles.
Yeah, I find it. They find the exterior, accepting the fact that the exterior angles sum to 360. They find that easier to accept than the interior. The interior they're less convinced of, I think. Is what I find.
Yeah, I
think. Have you got anything else to say about number 2, or should we move on to someone else? He's gone quiet.
Yeah, that's me done. Yeah, so yeah.
Great stuff. Charlotte, do you want to say what anything that prompted in your mind about any of the cells?
So what number 1 just made me think that normally, I know when I've said before, you try to introduce the interior angles and you say draw triangles, and you get all sorts of them, and they draw triangles all over the place, and they're not necessarily from one point. So you sort of say, right, pick a point and go from that point, and look much like the very first example in number 1. So that was quite interesting to think about what point to pick, because I don't necessarily think I'd thought of that before. I just picked a vertex and gone for that. But then number 2 makes me think, how do I normally introduce it, and is it easier? Like I say, they tend to, and I'd use what Atul suggested with where it reduces to a point. So and there's the whole thing of if you imagine yourself walking around a shape, I've done that before, and where would you end up? You've turned through 360 if you walk around the edge, but that sort of thing. So that they get the sum of the exterior is 360, and if they accept that, then it might be easier to look at the interior angles that way instead. But they were kind of my initial thoughts anyway.
Can I just quickly ask on this one to everyone? I've never been, I'm going to choose my words carefully here. I've never been a big fan of getting kids to remember the formula. Reason why is maybe it's just me, but I prefer the idea that they make the connection that it's 2 less triangles than the number of sides. Because the triangles, we multiply that by 180. Then if you want one particular angle, you then divide it by the number of sides, which is essentially, I feel, what the formula is suggesting. But I think the formula prompts a lot of confusion. And I don't know. I always think I think it could cause potentially more cognitive overload if a child's stressing to try and remember 180 times n minus 2 divided by n. So I'd rather them remember sort of the method as opposed to the physical formula. Does anybody have any opinions on that?
I'd agree. I normally do the method kind of first, and obviously then show where that formula is derived from. But when obviously working out and solving things, I again would remove the formula and kind of get them to use their knowledge and skills that they already know, as opposed to having to go straight to a formula. Because I found if you rely on the formula, it tends they might make a mistake with the formula, or they've remembered it incorrectly. But I think it's still important for them to know that what they found out just linked to that formula. So it's kind of tying them together, but always going back to, or I normally start with, right, what's your exterior angle? But then always still linking it back to that formula, because I think they need to understand, that there is a formula and this is where it's come from.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, Adam, and I'm sure most people have thought about this and reflected on this. I know that obviously the standard that I just get into GeoGebra and I just say, how can we split this shape up to make things easy for ourselves? Because often we simplify things in mathematics to make them easier. When we don't know something, we use something we already know. So let's split up into triangles or something like that. So then we split up into lots of triangles, and then that question there on cell 1. Which way would be the best way to kind of minimize our work? And so often kids will say like, well, the least number of triangles, surely. And then kind of once we've done that for one shape, we'll do it for another shape and kind of get the tabular data on the board to show there's always 2 less triangles than the number of sides, like you said. So then we'll write the formula down on the board: 180 degrees times by the minimum number of triangles always gives you the interior angle sum. And kind of like, it's almost like a dialogic discussion. It's like on Danny Brown. People know him on Twitter. He's kind of moved away from maths teaching. He's counselling a bit now, but I remember he talked quite a lot about dialogic teaching. It's something that came out of Cambridge University as well. It's kind of this constant dialogue between students, this kind of investigatory kind of discovery-based dialogue, in which you are very much the leader of the discussion. You're not like, the guide on the side kind of thing, but you're discovering together, essentially. And GeoGebra is a really good tool for that, of course. But very much building up the formula without putting down the formula to begin with, building it up. That understanding is and I do it very much for this first one, the minimum triangle form. And then it was only quite recent. It was only about a year ago when I realized that if I simplify this form in different ways, I get, what does it mean? What does the algebra mean geometrically? What's the GeoGebra, essentially? What's the connection between the algebra and the geometry? And I realized, this is actually the exterior angle form of an interior. And this is if you've got the same number of triangles as the number of sides. So you've got this particular scenario or this scenario kind of thing. So then connecting not for all students, but for some students, connecting the algebra to the geometry as well is quite nice. But I think that's a really good question, and something that I think probably most people.
Yeah, it's a formula is a symbolic representation of what's actually happening. So if I often spend quite a long time between the language part of what the formula is trying to represent, the geometry part, and them doing stuff. And it's only when this whole kind of concrete picture, abstract language, all of this thing comes together, then you just look at the formula and you know what it means, but only because you've gone through various cycles of doing it. You got a nice comment on the nth term. I never thought of that actually. Someone else has said that, Anthony Joseph. The number 4, the example at the bottom. I've never thought of this topic and linked it to sequences in a formal way.
The interesting thing about a pedagogical prompt, like when I make them, I'm kind of very much thinking in a connective way. And when you're looking at a textbook, or even like a lot of journal articles and things, like you're not necessarily connecting topics. They're not great media to connect topics. You just get the topic presented to you. And when you think about when your major thought process is how can I connect with other things, you end up kind of like discovering quite a lot of interesting things pedagogically. So it's the type of thing where actually creating a pedagogical prompt is a really useful and valuable experience, I think. Marcia, did you give any reflections on any of the?
I think for me, when I look at number 3, actually about the different splits, I always go to triangles, and actually looking at this, I would now, just from this little bit, probably encourage students to do it in a completely different way and look at what they see as opposed to always going to that triangle, because I think that's just the method that I've kind of always encouraged. And actually just by looking at this is prompting me to think I would do this in another way.
Just going to go to, just because I've just thought that on MathSpot, I think there's a geo board, which is quite nice. So not that I've used this in this context before, but yeah, I guess you could have students kind of just like split that up in as many different ways as possible, not just with triangles, but with anything. A pentagon and a triangle, and getting them taking lots of screenshots and putting them into, maybe a homework task if you've got the laptop capabilities and things. But yeah, really good point.
We've got a question.
Say about the prompt.
Got a question from Jenna Sanderson to all of us. I'd love to know if you all teach exterior angles before teaching interior angles. So many teachers do this in a different order, so would love to hear any thoughts. We kind of talked about that already, but maybe if we all take turns. I tend to do exterior with that whole point thing that I mentioned first.
Yeah, I tend to do that as well. So the exterior, I like that dynamic geometry where you reduce it to a point, like you said, and then I find that they accept the angles on a straight line and angles that meet at a point on a straight line, should I say. Yeah, they accept that.
Mine would be the same as Charlotte as well, just exactly how she said it.
Yeah, I agree with Charlotte as well. I've taught interior angles before first, and like I say, it's less demanded to work out an exterior angle first, and they spot the angles on a straight line equaling 180 first as well. And
it's almost nice to show them the triangles after as well, to show them why the sum is the way it is afterwards as well, to show them, say, 1 after you've done 2. Yeah, from that prompt.
I have to say I haven't, and that's because I was so worried that they would just focus on the only method. So they would get that method in their head because it is genuinely the easiest method. I think we probably all agree that just knowing that one fact about the 360 degrees and then working from there is just make it a very, very manageable thing to do. So I was really worried that they would focus just on that one method, and kind of if we talked about anything else, if we talked about splitting it into triangles and things, they just thought, I'm just going to use this method because it's clearly the easiest method. So in a way, I kind of leave it till later because I'm worried that they'll just focus on that and use that even when I want them to use these ones, the different splits and the number 1.
Anthony's got a really good point about exam questions that have different polygons within polygons, that then you have to think of other things as well. Well, depend on the question obviously, but he says there are different polygons within polygons, but personally I have negated this with my teaching. Not so.
Yeah, you're right. In prompt 3, is the exam questions quite often do those sorts of things where they split shapes up like that.
Interesting. No, because I teach the MYP, which is very investigation based and very kind of, and our four assessment strands are pattern searching, knowledge and understanding, communication, and real life application. So we have to. So, for example, with I think it's with actually different with the number one with cell 1 or cell 3. That's an assessment for us. So we assess at the end of a unit, not at the start. At the end of a unit, we would assess them on their ability to pattern search, organize data, and then move forward as well. Maybe even extend it for themselves and think about, like you said, maybe putting a polygon within a polygon or something. So that would be an actual assessment. It would be a test to do that. So yeah, so a lot of means you have to teach a little bit differently when you have to teach them to be mathematicians as well. So yeah. Have we got time to go to the last one?
Yeah, we got. Yeah, we can go one last one. Yeah.
Let's go to the final one.
Yeah.
So this one I I've just posted on the website as well. It's Pythagoras 3 because there's been 2 about this. There's another one. There's one more about Pythagoras. There's Pythagoras 4 still to come. Bit of a teaser there. And so yes, this one's quite interesting. I just to give you a bit of context on Pythagoras proofs. Even though I knew, you see that standard, like if you Google it, how many proofs are there of Pythagoras? Of course, there are. No one actually knows the answer to that. There are likely infinite. I mean, it's difficult to say that for definite, but I mean, there are probably an infinite number of proofs. But there was a book in which 367 proofs were published. Can't remember what the book was. I've never had a copy of the book, but until about, I think 3 years ago, I think I was maybe 10 years in or something, I thought I really should know more than one proof. I just knew this stat number 1, standard school-based proof, basically. And it's like, if 367 are laid out in a book, surely I should know like 3 or 4 of them. And so I looked them up and I picked out the ones that I would really want to, that I thought, oh wow, they're really good for different reasons. So that was the kind of rationale behind this prompt. But yeah, I was talking a little bit to give people a little bit of time to kind of have a look at them as well. But I'll give you kind of a little bit of time to have a think about these ones and see if you can focus in on maybe one of them.
I think, like you said, I wasn't really aware of many of these. So I guess this is why you'd use these sort of things and see how many other people in your department, maybe some people in your department do know about them and maybe they know other ways, and this could lead to a whole discussion on different methods that people know. That's quite nice.
Mm-hmm. I have to say, if I can start with this particular one, I'm going to focus in on cell 2. It's actually kind of my favorite school-based proof now. So even though number 1 was the one that that everyone sees and it's in textbooks and things, number 2 is the one that I very much like to use, because often, certainly in our scheme of work, areas of trapeziums and areas of triangles come way before Pythagoras, and also in our particular scheme of work we do it in year 9. So we've already done simplifying quadratic expressions as well, just just with 2 brackets. So we've already done all of this in our scheme of work. And so I just think that breaking up a trapezium into 3 triangles and finding the areas and then finding the area of the trapezium is really straightforward. Equating those and then multiplying by 2 and going from there is actually really straightforward. And actually what I've done in the past as well is I've just shown the picture. So I've just shown this picture and said, President Garfield proved Pythagoras' theorem in 1876, an American president, using this picture. And in some cases I've said, like, find the area of the areas of things and see if you can prove Pythagoras. And it's like, that's not an easy thing to do. Like, you're not going to get that many students doing that. But I also think that proof is a really important part of mathematics, and that students should struggle at times but not often. I don't particularly feel that they should struggle often, but I feel like most of the time at university and things I struggled. So I feel that students should know that it's okay to struggle in mathematics, and that, you know, just providing a picture and saying, can you prove Pythagoras from this picture, is a struggle, and not many people are going to do it, and that's absolutely fine, and that maybe 1 or 2 people can, but we'll talk about it afterwards. We'll talk about it in a few minutes time. So number 2 is actually my favorite now, even though 3 and 4 I love as well, but I love it. I love number 2 for students. Adam, have you got anything to add about?
I use number 1 pretty much, no matter who it is. I'm just trying to think, because maybe it's just look at the draw, because most of the time when I'm teaching Pythagoras, I'm teaching it to foundation kids, and I'm thinking, right, what prerequisites would they need? What are they going to be able to comprehend and compute? What's not going to cause them to burn out a bit? I love the other 3 as a mathematician. I'm just trying to think. I know you've asked this in your first prompt. Do you ask students to reproduce proof? Do you ask them to remember it? And does it matter if they don't? I'd love them to be able to reproduce a prompt. I don't think I could use 2 and 3, but certainly 4 actually. 4 really caught my eye a bit. Just equating the upper length to be a squared plus b squared and the lower length to be c squared, I thought he's a lovely proof of it as well.
I think you'd show. Do you think you know that
I'd
would
show them that change? Because multiple. I've always been a big believer. Multiple representations always help secure that understanding a bit. And I think it makes them feel more confident. It makes them understand it deeper, and it makes them remember it better if they can see that it works in more than one way. And certainly, proof by reconstruction, that the standard school-based proof without words, is always a good place to start. But again, it's very weird. So I always think the problem with that one is it lacks the maths behind it. You're just sort of showing them that these pieces fit together like a jigsaw, whereas that simple proof in the bottom right-hand corner has an element of mathematics behind it. It has a sort of it has a connection. It has that more solid connection on paper that I'd want them to see. Sorry, I'm waffling here, guys. So, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I teach all people in every stage of their maths journey, right, from like number bonds to proofs, and again, it just boils down to where they are in that journey, and if they've already become fluent with that kind of symbolic manipulation and that geometry and algebra link, and they do all that stuff, then we go for it. But if they haven't, then we have to build those prerequisite skills. But certainly you can show them the standard one just as is without that much abstract symbolism, or this you can do it with paper cutting. I think there's a paper folding one as well, and then at some point when they get all these things in place, then you can start looking at those. But yeah, this is really it's really elegant. I mean, if I'm honest, I've only considered the first one as well, so yeah.
Can I just ask a quick follow-up, I suppose? I'm thinking about scheme of work now, and would I teach similar triangles before I teach something like Pythagoras and trigonometry, or would I teach Pythagoras and trigonometry before I teach similar triangles? I'm wondering what you guys think.
I don't know. They normally come after, don't they?
We do an investigation around trigonometry, so we have students develop the trigonometry again as an assessment, as an assessed task, as a graded assessed task, in which they use similar triangles to kind of develop an understanding of trigonometry. So that's the kind of in to trigonometry essentially for us.
Sounds very different to what we're used to teaching, the style that we're used to teaching in, I guess, at the moment. So it certainly sounds, the way that you talked about the assessments and how they were more investigation based and things like that, we don't have a lot of that here. I mean, there's no coursework either, is there? So I guess it's up to us if we're going to introduce this sort of thing. We have to do that because there's nothing else that's going to prompt that.
Yes. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Do you know what I mean?
So I'd just like to go into the Hinge questions. I just wondered. So seems like all of us do focus on this one when we're teaching it. At what point would you do that?
Probably introduction, maybe at the moment. Probably introduction. It's certainly. I mean, last year I focused purely based. I was teaching Key Stage 3, and we didn't get to do Pythagoras or anything. So I'm trying to remember the last time that I really did this from scratch. And then other classes I've taken over, they've already had it introduced. So yeah, so me trying to remember what I would do. I think I used to show them a video of the water thing. I don't know if anyone's seen that, the wheel and of the.
I use that.
Have you seen that? So yeah, they just quite like that. I mean, it's not a proof per se, but it's quite a nice visualization. I do. The more I look at two, that I do quite like two, and I do think I could get some students. But I thought one of the most interesting things I thought was about being stuck and getting them to be okay with being stuck. That's a state to be okay with. I thought that was really important, and I thought you could do that with some of these actually, and that you could use those to bring that in to lessons, that have a go and be stuck, play around with it a little bit. I thought that was quite nice. So that's another way you could bring this in, I think.
Okay. I think we've discussed, we've done, hopefully decent discussion, and hopefully, again, with some of the prompts, there might just be a kind of also a bit of a source of learning as well, in a sense. Because I know that 3 years ago, I didn't know 2, 3, or 4, and now when I think about Pythagoras, I think about 1, 2, 3, and 4, which are all actually very, very, I think, quite manageable constructive proofs. Like there's only a few steps in all of them. And then my favorite proof is actually at the bottom here, number 4, which I always actually show. I do with year 10 or year 11, because it's putting triangles on a coordinate grid and finding gradients, and then getting the and because you've got a 90-degree angle in the circle, semicircles, then you can easily find, they're clearly perpendicular, these two gradients here. So then you show Pythagoras that way, which is actually my favorite proof of Pythagoras. But I only know 5, I know 5 proofs now. And it's actually really nice to know 5 proofs, because when you're doing areas of trapezia, or when you're doing similar shapes, or when you're doing circle theorems, or if you're doing perpendicular lines, then, there's a really nice proof of Pythagoras for this as a plenary, or as maybe someone to think about if you start them off as an extension task. So it's quite nice to know them.
Yeah, that's quite nice. And I think it's important that you go and make something, like you say at the end of it, something that you like, a slide or a task or something that you're going to do with that now. Once you've had this discussion, something that you really liked about it, and go, right, I'm going to make this, and then you've got something to take away from the meeting as well, haven't you, from it? So I think that's quite nice.
And I really like your point again, Charlotte, about struggling through it. I mean, I've got a A-level tutor who's homeschooled, a very high attaining one, and he always wants proofs for everything. Like, he asked me, well, we're doing the product rule, why does it work? Why? Where's the proof? How can you prove from past friends? And I'm like, I remember doing it like maybe a decade ago or something, but well, let me look it up. Let's both look it up.
Yeah.
And then we just go to it together. And it's a really good proof of what we like, and I've got it. So I think, there's no, it is thinking mathematically. We have to kind of slog through it, conjecture, generalize, look things up, and be convinced ourselves before really, really solidly, and go through that struggle or reintroduction ourselves, and then we can introduce it to our pupils and tell them the same thing, like, it's okay to struggle with it. It's
And if we find something new on one of these things, then at least that gives us an insight into struggling with that topic perhaps we hadn't struggled with before. You wouldn't think of struggling with prime factorization, but then if it's something that you've not seen before, like one of those cells, then that just gives you that bit more of an insight. That's quite nice as well.
It's one of those prompts that you're not necessarily 100% sure about when you're going to use one of them, or if you'll even use one of them. But when that moment arises, you're so happy that 5 proofs of Pythagoras, and you know some lovely applications of different things, of similar triangles, of areas, or of perpendicular lines, for example, or a circle theorem. It's so nice to have those things. Just that it might come up like once every 3 years, but when it does, you're so happy to have that in your arsenal. Anyway, I think like we've had quite a nice little discussion on free prompts there, and I just wanted to say thanks hugely to all of you for kind of agreeing to come on and discuss these things. I think that one thing that's certainly shown me, having been like the first time that actually discuss some prompts, that it's actually, I think it would be quite helpful to have some level of structure in a department meeting, and to try and focus ideas on 1 or 2 key points that people kind of agree that they might want to focus things on. That's certainly something that I will take away from this discussion personally. But thank you so much for kind of giving up your time to talk to us, and thank you, Atul, of course, for the live streams and for promoting collaborative pedagogy on Twitter as well. It's an amazing thing.
No, once again, yeah, thanks everyone for their time and coming onto this. I know this is it can be a bit of daunting going onto this Twitter live stream, but it is really good. Yeah, it's for the greater good. We've had lots of really lovely comments, and it's stimulating discussion, and really importantly, keep that discussion going. This video will be there, the recording will remain there. So this is sort of the beginning of it. Really see what else comes up. See what other pedagogy prompts you want to hear. Maybe very quickly you could plug your book as well, Daniel. I know you've got a book. I think we should definitely use this chance and go for a plug. I saw it come up on your site, but I think it's good to. Yeah, well, there you go, Charlotte's customer. Yeah.
Brilliant. I don't even have a copy with me. Charlotte, please plug my book.
It's really good. But if I think that the maths of rainbows went straight over my head. Maybe I didn't really
literally,
but the maths, straight over. But no, it's really nice. There's a really nice little conversation scripted at near the end, about you sort of start the book saying about if a member of staff asks you about why do you find maths beautiful, which is quite funny because you do get that from non-maths colleagues, like, why do you find maths beautiful? Like, why do you? And then you finish it by how you would now have that conversation and what you would tell them, and it's really nice. It's definitely worth the read.
Wow.
Yes, well, actually, because my wife is very good at basically everything, but maths is the one thing she doesn't particularly love, and so when she would often ask me, like, oh my God, can you stop talking about this, and just at least if you're going to talk about it, tell me about some really interesting things. So that was also something that prompted me to write it. Not only a staff room conversation, but completely different to Pedagogy Prompts. And if you're really interested in mathematical beauty, what is it, and how you might talk about it with people, and whether everyone can experience it, or whether it's actually just confined for just a lucky few, I would say, because if you experience mathematical beauty, then I think you're experiencing a very pure form of beauty. It's all about that. And I think I tried to write it so that most people could engage with most of it. So I tried to write it with my wife in mind, basically. The mathematics of rainbows, that was the only bit that I just really wanted to put in there, because I just as a kid, from being a kid, I always wanted to understand how a rainbow formed. And when I did understand that, it was such an important pivotal moment in my own kind of emotional response, aesthetic response to mathematics, that I'd had to get it in there. But I'm very aware that some people will just gloss over that bit, and that's absolutely fine. But the rest of it, I hope, is quite accessible, even to people that don't know a huge amount of maths. If you fancy it, then go for it. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about it. Although I do get quite a lot of questions via email, so if it takes me a while to get back to you, then I apologise for that in advance.
Well, I have got a copy of it, but it's I've got a queue of books, so I'll get around to it finally.
Excuses.
So once again, thank you everyone for your time, and thank you Daniel for presenting to us and getting us like stimulated and thinking about these prompts. I definitely learned a few things pretty much I can use straight away, and thanks for everyone on Twitter who asked a question, and Facebook. I intend to live stream all through the summer, whoever's around, who happens to be around, and look forward to the next one. So I'm just gonna end this live stream now, and we'll just have a chat and finish off as well. All right.